I'm Nadia.
And I'm Kyle.
And this is Discipleship Moments. So, what is a discipleship moment?
A discipleship moment is when God uses us to reach those around us in a very special moment in time that is God inspired.
When did you feel a calling from God to start a podcast?
Well, I was in a church service a few weeks ago, and during the sermon, God just kept talking to me about reaching those beyond my local relationships, and he talked about using social media, and I have no idea how to do any of this stuff. And then he said to start a podcast, and I was like, God, I don't know how to do that, and I need people to be able to do that correctly to help me.
It's really funny because almost the same thing happened to me, but mine was at a revival night. So I was just praising God, and he put on my heart to tell people about him. So what did that mean? So I prayed about it a lot, and he said, start a podcast. And I was like, with who, when, how? Because I don't know how to do a podcast. And then I just talked to my mom one day, and she goes, that's funny you say that, because your dad had the same thing happen to him. Let's get to know each other a little bit. First off, did you grow up in a Christian household?
Yeah, we went to church somewhat regularly. I really didn't enjoy church until I was a teenager and started going to youth group and really developed close relationships with friends at youth group.
Yeah, that's good. That's my thing too.
It's yours too?
Except for I feel like my family's definitely more Christian based than, I don't know, yours was back then. But I feel like it's definitely more about finding yourself and finding it for yourself than having your parents push it on you, because it's so much more rewarding in the end.
I agree, and that's, so when we were raising you girls, I was really focused on wanting you to have your own relationship with God and not us forcing you to go to church. And
right.
I think a lot of times you probably experienced where maybe we would go to church and you just stay home,
yep.
Right? And that was fine. We knew that we were leading by example, and we wanted you to have your own relationship with God.
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely what parents should do, instead of being like, oh, you have to go, because the days that I didn't go to church, I kind of felt guilty. But I mean, it was nice to sleep in sometimes.
Do you remember the time when we were going, I was dropping you off at youth group, and I said, no, you have to go because you were saying that you didn't like the girls or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess we didn't end up going because you shared with me what your real concerns were, right?
Exactly. And I feel like there's so many churches that can ruin religion for people. And that's such a sad thing, because it really pushes people away from even trying a different church or going to church again because of the church body and not what they're there for.
Absolutely. I've had some very negative experiences with churches. It's important to remember that a church is filled with sinners. Even the leaders of churches are sinners at times, are sinners too, and we shouldn't put them on a pedestal. They've been chosen by God to lead that church, but they may sin against us as people that go to that church.
Exactly.
So going back to that story of the time that we were on our way to youth group, maybe you could share from your perspective, what that felt like of, what did we do after I said, okay, you don't have to go to church. I remember I actually took you to the door and said, you have to get out, right? Mm-hmm. And you were crying.
I was, because it was just, I felt like I was almost held against my will, and I just never felt like when I went there I was learning about God. Obviously I was, but it was boring. I would try to fall asleep, and it was just felt out of place. So I stopped going to that youth group because I just didn't enjoy going anymore.
Well, what was the deal that we made that night?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I do remember. I said, okay, you don't have to go to this youth group, but you do need to have your own relationship with God, and you need to pursue God. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry I cut you off.
No, that's what I was going to say. Something along those lines is that you just have to find it. Even if you don't like where you're at, you can find somewhere better that you fit in more.
So tell me about your kind of where you were at in your life at that time. Yes, you were going to a youth group, but you were kind of getting involved with some things that maybe wasn't something that mom and dad really wanted you to be involved with, right?
Right. So I just feel like in that time it was like, oh yeah, I'm going, all these people were perfect. They were all held on pedestals that were greater than everybody because they already had a relationship with God, and they were pushing those people to get better, but not helping the people that were struggling. And like at that point, I honestly didn't see a problem with it because going out and having a few drinks wasn't the end of the world to me, or doing just something that wouldn't please the Lord as I know now. But in the moment, it felt fine. Afterwards, I would always feel guilty doing something bad. If I went to a party, I'd always feel guilty the next day. Like, I just feel like, why am I feeling guilty? Because obviously there's a problem with it. And I know many people who deal with that feeling of feeling guilty. Then, like, why do you do it? Because they don't know the real reason why they're feeling guilty.
So why do you think you were feeling guilty?
Well, because I know now that, like, there was a God who has these, not rules, because there's not rules in the Bible. It's just about obeying God. So it's, like, I was feeling guilty because God knew that I had a purpose in my life, and it was to live for Him, not live for the worldly desires. It says that in the Bible so many times, that you cannot serve two things. So you cannot serve God and the world. You can only serve God, or you can serve the world. And being stuck in the middle is the most dangerous thing.
Absolutely. And that's, it says there's nothing worse than being a lukewarm Christian, right?
Yeah.
And, if God is pursuing you and you're pursuing God, there's probably going to be some devil pursuing you as well, right? Because the devil knows that he wants you to remain a lukewarm Christian,
right,
versus sharing God's love with others.
Exactly. And I feel like, especially after I got baptized, like, the devil was not trying to get a hold of me, but he's definitely working harder to get at me. But I was like, you know what? No. Because I know my God, and I know, like, I want to live for Him. Like, that was not in question anymore. Like, I mean, that was farther away than when I got baptized, when I gave my life to God, but, like, it's such a rewarding thing.
So talk about your journey with God in that relationship, but also your friends' relationship, right? Because you were partying with some of these other people, and how did that change those relationships? And what's the journey between where you didn't want to go to youth group to your baptism that you just talked about?
Well, I feel like that was a point, or like the old youth group was just a point in my life where my friends weren't really Christians. They said they're Christians, but they weren't. Like, we all were. We are all Christians, but we don't have a relationship with God. That's my biggest point I'll ever make, is it's so much more of a relationship than a religion. Like, that over anything. Like, religion is rules, like, follow this, follow this, follow this. Yes, we still have to follow that, but with God, our desire to sin is less. So, like, when you are having a relationship with God, you don't even want to sin. Like, it's not even checking off the list of the rules. But anyways, as, like, I feel like I progressed, one of my friends that I made throughout work invited me to go to a camp this summer, and that was such a life-changing experience. Like, I was still doing, like, bad things then, but when I got back from camp, I was like, I want to change my life around. And that was just the most eye-opening experience ever. Could really feel, like, the Holy Spirit in that place. Like, we had a conversation, and the next day, like, all of our questions were answered. And so...
What are some examples of that?
Well, we were sitting at, like, there was a hotel at this campsite, and we were sitting in the lobby of it with some couches, and it was super late at night, so we were having kind of a delusional conversation. And we were all not getting freaked out, but we were like saying like, what if this happens? Like, what if we're like, I don't know, like, if we die right now, are we going to heaven? Basically, like, whatever. And then we were getting so scared. And one of my friends just saw like a vision in her head that said faith over fear. And that is such a big like saying, I guess, for people that are Christians. But like I feel like in that moment we really lived it out. And then the next day, like the sermon was all about just like not looking what was behind you, but looking what's ahead of you and seeing that just having faith in God, like, and just working for him will be so rewarding in the end. And so that happened, and then we came home, and you know, you have the camp high, and then it just goes away. Like, nothing, like, you're like, yes, I'm on fire for Jesus, but why is everybody so on fire for Jesus in 1 week that you're at camp, and then you go home and everything goes back to normal?
So true.
And so this time I was like, you know what? I'm coming home with a different attitude, and I'm pursuing what I just felt. Because I want to feel it every time I'm worshiping God. Every day. Not every Sunday, not every Wednesday, but every single day that I'm living. And just like surrendering every single day. Because it's such... You can't be a Christian and only go to church on Sundays. That's a big thing that also people don't realize.
It's a relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you only visit your grandma once a week, your relationship isn't as tight as if you're with your friends every day,
right?
Or with your parents, or with your sister,
mm-hmm.
or whatever it is. But our relationships are either growing or shrinking, right? And we need to put that time in and spend time with God. And that means worshiping, that means reading the Bible, and that means, talking about God with our friends and family.
Right. And so, going off of the timeline, so that was in summer, and then I feel like, again, just like kept going on with my life, but I was still pursuing God a lot more than I had before. And then I started going youth again when school started, because I didn't know that it was in summer. But I got a lot more involved this year, and one of the first days back, I realized that I just wanted to give it all. There was a sermon, I don't remember exactly what it was on, but it was just trusting God's plan, because he always has a plan for you. It may not seem like it in the moment, but it'll always be better when you trust in God. And so we were had an altar call at the end of the night. I was there for a while, and I just really I could feel God just like touching down on me and being like, this is it, like, this is right now, whatever. And so I felt like at that moment, I really just felt like I had a relationship with God that I was striving to have for the longest time, because I've seen so many people with that relationship, but I never knew how to get it. And then there was maybe 2 weeks later, I realized that baptisms were in December, and then I was like, I don't know if I really want to do that. But I always told you that I wanted to get baptized once I had a relationship with God. So, like, I was driving home from work, and I turned on my Spotify. I just clicked shuffle, and all of a sudden, like, the song Sea of Victory came on, and the Lord just told me, get baptized. So,
wow.
Yeah, that's how my life has changed.
God definitely can talk to us through song, or a lot of different ways, right?
Yeah, so how about you? What's your, like, in what moment did you realize you gave your life to Christ?
Well, I was at a youth conference when I was probably your age, 16, 17, and I remember being just surrounded by a lot of people that were also just there praising God, and you're right. I mean, that whole being in those camp or conference environments, and it's easy to just be all in, right? And then what does it mean when you get home? And I like I said, I grew up in church, but I knew that I needed to make that own personal dedication, and so I made a commitment at that church, or at that conference, and thereafter, really that's when I started going to youth group and being really a lot more committed to youth group. And I think prior to that I would go to youth group, but it was more like going there to play games and doing whatever, right? But I was more committed to the relationship with God at that time. No, it doesn't mean I didn't screw up. I was still a teenager, right? So like, I definitely screwed up and did some, did a lot of things that, looking back, I would prefer I hadn't done.
Right.
But I knew that God was there to protect me and to forgive me after I screwed up. So that's that was the beginning of my pursuit of God. But then I went through my college time, and we got married young, right? So we were still in college when we got married, as you know, and I strongly believe that we were meant to be together, and God put us together. But we were married young, and we're both very kind of strong personalities.
Yeah.
So we definitely struggled for many years. But there was one key moment that I knew that God was watching over me and guiding me, and it was we were married for maybe a year at the time, and we had just had a fight, and I went and laid down in the living room of our house on the hardwood floors, like not comfortable at all, right? And I'm just looking up at the ceiling, at the ceiling fan going around, and crying out to God and just saying, God, why is this happening? I believe that you've put us together, but we just can't get along.
Right.
And God just said to me, Ephesians 4. I'd never read Ephesians 4 before. I didn't even know what it meant at the time. But it popped in my head, so I went and grabbed the Bible, and Ephesians 4 talks about being patient and being humble in your calling, and being the person that God calls you to be. And I think in a lot of cases I was probably not being as patient and as calm as I should be in our marriage. And now, did I instantly change? No, of course not. We don't instantly change. It was a long growth process for me, and God used that time to really, I like to think it's kind of like rounding the edges off of a sharp stone, right? And God rounds our edges off and uses those experiences to help to build our overall story.
Right. Yeah, I like that you said that it's all about being like patient and everything, because I was reading the Bible the other day, and I came across the verse that's love is patient, love is kind, love does not boast, love does not envy, and so on. And so I took a moment and I wrote down each word that it said. Love is patient. What's the definition of patient? What does the definition of kind? What does not envy? What does not boast mean? Because I feel like the word love is such an overused word that people don't know how to use. Yeah. Because I can say I love somebody but be so rude to them. That's not being loving.
I like to think love is a verb, right? Love is an action. Right.
And so that's why I believe, kind of going off the topic, is that people that do not know God do not know true love.
I agree.
Anyways.
I think they also don't know how to receive true love, right?
Exactly.
Not just give, but receive.
Right. So, my next point was, in the Lord's Prayer, we pray on earth as it is in heaven. And I know you've talked about this before, because there was one time before I had my relationship with God, I was like, do you ever just, wonder to yourself or, question, what if there isn't a God? And I was like, but then I thought about it. I was like, but at least I lived a peaceful life, right? Because with God, you have peace. And I have felt that peace overcome me. there have been moments where I'm stressed or something, and I just pray to God and be like, just, I can't handle this anymore. And then you'll just feel like, you won't feel like, obviously, like water washing through you, but it will feel like you're just cleansed, and like your brain will be like gone, right?
Yep.
So anyways, like, how have you experienced heaven on earth?
Wow. Yeah, I firmly believe that there is truly heaven on earth. And, I think in those instances where we're pursuing God's will wholeheartedly, not just us, but those around us as well.
Yeah.
And, that's where there's a harmony between the people around us that God uses to create heaven on earth, right? And it's, unfortunately, it's a very short time typically, because we're sinful, right? And we screw up. I think that in some of those camp environments, that is where our walls are down, and we experience heaven on earth, and that's where God really can talk to us. I hope you share your story about the dove, right?
Oh yeah.
I think that's an example. I think that when we're out in nature, I'll share a story with you about, I was one time walking through the forest, just kind of talking to God, and just myself, and, just kind of like contemplating, God, what is your plan for me? What do you want me to do? What is my next step for you? And it was really in a time of of stillness, right? Of lack of clarity of what God's plan was for my life. And, God very clearly said to me, my plan for you is like this path through the woods. And if you picture a path through the woods, you can only see for a little bit, right, of what that path is. But as you get closer to the next step, you can see where your next turn is, right? And it was a very vivid picture for me to be able to understand what God's really, He doesn't want us to plan for what's coming 5 years from now. He wants us to follow Him step by step by step.
Yep. And I feel like that's such a thing that is so hard in our society too, is trusting God's plan for our future. Because we can be like, I want to be married by 23, I want to have kids by 25, I want 2 little kids, 1 boy, 1 girl, I want to have this much money, I want to be a doctor, like whatever. Yeah. And then God can be like, actually, you want to go to Africa and be a missionary. And
absolutely.
You won't be married till you're 35. Like, it's all in God's plan. Like, you just really have to trust each step, because you can die tomorrow. So who cares what 5 years from now looks like?
Yeah. When you were first a baby, you were about a year old, and not even a year old. I was working for a company that I thought that was going to be where I was going to stay for a long, long time, and I thought that's what God's plan was for me, and to be there and provide for our family. And this was at the time that the economic collapse happened, and I lost my job. So I'm at home with less than a year old and less than 3-year-old daughters, a wife that was working part-time, because she wanted to be home with you girls. And I just felt this huge weight on my shoulder. But right at the time when my severance package was set to expire, God provided me a job literally to the day of when my severance package was expiring. So it was this really time of having to give up complete control to God, because I was in no control, other than I certainly was calling and making a lot of effort to find another job, but to find the right job that God really connected me with, which really set me up for what His plan was for me long term.
Right. That's good. Yeah. You have anything else that you would like to say?
Well, I kind of referenced your dove story. Maybe, can you share that from camp?
So it was like the first or second night we were there, and we were just worshiping, and then I don't want to name drop, but she gets lots of visions from God, and she goes, I just saw you as a dove. Like, I don't know what that means, but I saw you as a dove. And so I was praying. I was like, God, like, what do you mean I'm a dove? Like, what does that mean? Or, like, I represent a dove. And then some lady, we were, like, doing, like, a prayer walkthrough. And this lady, like, all of a sudden just, like, goes, I see a dove. I was like, what does that mean? Like, you keep telling me I'm a dove, but what does that mean? And then, so I just kept praying, and I was just like, what is this? And it was just like, you will be wiped clean, because that's what that's what a dove represents, is like just cleanliness. And so, whatever. So I got that kind of like answered, and then, go back a few months. I was just reading the Bible one day. I like to just open my Bible and read whatever the page turns to. That's what I read.
Yeah.
The first word that stood out to me was like a dove. Like those 3 words. And I was just like, it's crazy, because like that's when it was right after I got baptized, and it was just like a dove. And I had just got clean by the Holy Spirit, and just like let go of everything. I just thought that was really cool.
So what does it mean to be like a dove?
Just like be cleaned, and like just living for the Lord, I guess.
And it's a sign of peace, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for joining us on Discipleship Moments.
I hope you enjoyed your time with us. Send us a DM about your DM or discipleship moment.
See you next time.